Hi and welcome to Debt Tale. This is Rebecca Bautista and today we're going to be talking about budgeting considerations when you have pets. So let's get started. Getting a pet for companionship is great, but you also want to consider potential lifetime costs and how you need to think about things in terms of budgeting when you have said pet so you can take care of them to the fullest of your ability. So let's talk about the general one-time costs first. It's either the adoption/purchase fee that you have for the pet. So if you adopt, generally it is cheaper than buying a pet, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you may have a friend that had an oops litter and they're like, yeah, do you want this dog for like 25 bucks? And you're like, yeah, sure, and you get it. So that might be cheaper than getting that animal from a shelter. But in general, there are ways to lower that cost. So at local shelters, sometimes they have pets that have adoption fees already sponsored. There may be adopt-a-thon events where they have lower than their normal cost to adopt a pet. In terms of buying from a breeder, sometimes buying the puppy that is a little bit older, that was passed on from a previous litter, generally is cheaper unless they were trained for specific things. So in particular, Labradors, German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, those type of dogs sometimes will start going through training for protection or for retrieving or for farm tasks, etc. And those that have already received some sort of training then will be a little bit more expensive because the training cost was already included. Another one-time cost that you should consider, and this is in general for most animals, is microchipping. It is not something that is only done for cats and dogs, but I've seen it done for ferrets and other animals that sometimes can crawl away. In terms of birds, you can get bands where they apply it on the wrist, and that gives some information as well. These are things you want to consider for in case your animal gets away from you, whether that be because the animal escapes or because you had an unfortunate circumstance like your house burnt down, you were traveling and got into a car accident when they were in the car with you. Those type of events too can lead to your animals leaving. Now in general, the basic microchip cost is a one-time in which it's for the insertion of it as well as the original registration. However, some microchip companies offer a yearly subscription, and all that really does is allow you to broadcast to a greater range of people that your pet is missing via their bulletins, and sometimes they send like emails to these mass chains to help find your pet. Some of them also include where if your pet is found like more than 50 miles away from you, they will pay to have your pet given back to you. So that's something that is an additional fee on top of just the original microchipping, but you can be just as fine with a microchip because you, fingers crossed, you have people who as soon as they find a pet go to get them scanned for a microchip. Also, in certain states where pets are property, having a microchip that is registered to you is the best way to get your pet back should somebody decide that they found the pet and now they get to keep it. Now let's talk about recurring costs, which are of course the basics of food, medical costs, and then different enrichment and toys, etc. to keep your animal happy. Now this applies not just to dogs and cats, but also to fish, reptiles, invertebrates, etc. So it's across all our furred, clawed, scaled, and hairy skinned friends. So let's go. One thing when it comes to vets is also to consider whether or not your pet is considered exotic, because not all vets will handle exotic pets. Also, having an exotic pet will sometimes mean that the vets that you can go to that will deal with your particular pet are either further away or more expensive because you're paying for the specialization and the fact that they have experience with that type of pet. Also, some exotic pets will require additional fees in terms of paying for the right to own an exotic pet in certain jurisdictions, as well as you have to consider that a pet in one area that is okay may not be eligible as a pet in a different place. Pet insurance. So this is something that you pay on a monthly basis. crisis to help mitigate some of the costs should your pet have a medical crisis. Now, there are a variety of plans out there. There are pet wellness plans that include a reimbursement for shots, for just going to the vet once or twice a year, as well as like routine blood work, etc. But not all plans offer this type of reimbursement. There are accident-only plans, which will generally have like a max cap, say $10,000, as well as a deductible of which is how much do you have to pay before the insurance goes in and pays the rest. Things to consider with these type of plans is whether or not they pay the vets directly, or if they are the type that reimburse you, so you have to put the money up front first. Those are things that you have to consider because sometimes veterinary care can be really expensive, especially in the emergency case that your animal requires surgery and additional vet stay, etc., in which case you could be on the hook for hundreds to thousands of dollars. Now, I personally have experience with this. I've had 4 cats and 2 German Shepherds. And now 2 of my cats have had urinary blockages, which is and requires emergency surgery. And both times it cost us, well over $1,000 to get that repaired. Otherwise they would die. So those are things that can happen and things that you may want to consider, but it is not a necessary thing. In my experience, I no longer carry pet insurance because in general my pets are within the home, they don't go out, and so I'm not too worried of them running across the street and getting hit by a car because they are generally in our property. And also we have the luxury, or I should say we have the privilege of having a good amount of savings, and so we can pay for most medical emergencies in cash should it happen, and therefore we just didn't feel like it was necessary to be paying a monthly payment aside of that. Another thing is that you can fund your own pet emergency fund by, instead of paying for pet insurance on a monthly basis, you put aside a monthly amount into a bank account to accumulate, so that way should your pet need it, you have the money already. Another thing is that pet premiums do go up, and they generally also will have exclusions. So if you have the pet insurance starting from when they are babies, that is better because they generally don't have pre-existing conditions, and therefore when they get older, if they still have that policy in force and then they develop some type of medical requirement, diabetes, or they have kidney failure, etc., then they are covered for those necessary medications, etc. Now, if you purchase the plan when they were older and then they already had in their vet file that they had these type of issues, then most pet insurances will not pay for it. Another thing to consider is the fact that as their pet goes older in age, the pet premium will also go up, just because the older they are, generally the higher their pet costs are going to be, just because they will require more care because they will have more potential bodily failures. For some pets, you may want to consider training, and generally there are a few different types of training. There are training that include boarding, where you send your animal to the trainer and they start the training process. There are private classes in which you can either commute to the trainer or the trainer comes to your home. And then there's group classes. Now, what a pet can be trained on is a very broad category. It can be obedience, it could be protection, it could be herding, it could be sport, it could be tricks. Like, there's just so many different things, as well as the fact that some pets are eligible and capable of being trained for like seeing eye dogs or being epilepsy alert dogs, etc. So those are additional trainings that will require time and effort, and those are things that you may need to consider. Boarding / pet sitting. So when you go on vacation and you can't take your pet, who's going to take care of your pet for you? In general, you may consider boarding, in which you have your animal go to a place where they have kennels to take care of them, and this is generally for cats and dogs. But let's say you have a snake or a scorpion, etc., then you may look into a pet sitter or call a friend who also has those type of pets to do a check-in. Now, boarding sometimes can be expensive, but if you know it in advance, sometimes there are deals for longer stays. Sometimes you can pre-purchase days in a year, etc. So those are options for you. In terms of pet sitting, that's when you pay someone to come to your home and then take care of your pet. That sometimes can be cheaper than boarding, but you may need to consider whether or not your pet is a good pet for staying at home, because if they are anxious and they are not used to being alone in the home, they may cause more damage. Now, the reason why I bring this this up is because a lot of clients that I've had don't think about this, and then they describe to me the sticker shock of how much they had to pay to have their animal watched over. Now, this is especially true because a lot of people tend to go on vacation and trip around holidays when they are naturally off of work, and places will generally get slammed at those times and may charge a premium for these holiday type of hours. That is something that you want to think about in case you may need it. Last but not least is grooming, which some pets may require this, and so you want to think about how often are you going to be taking them, what type of services are you going to be receiving. There are some places that you can, again, book in advance, or if you go, 3 times, your 4th time is, a little bit discounted, or have like a frequent grooming stamp, punch, etc. And so those are things that you need to think about, because not all animals require additional grooming, but some do. And then there's also additional types of grooming like de-shedding, or a flea treatment involved, etc. Now, I didn't really touch upon medical costs and food costs. I just brought them in briefly, but of course are things to consider. I know that there is certain plans, certain vet offices that are national chains that will have like a discounted price. You pay into a membership on a monthly basis, and then when you go to the vet, you have decreased costs. In my experience, those actually weren't the best in terms of money, but for some, it's just convenient and works for them. As always, do your own research when it comes to things like that. And I hope that this video helps you think about a couple of different areas that you may need to consider for if you have a furry pet, when you have a furry pet, or if your kid is begging you for another. So let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, if you have any other ideas for this budgeting consideration series. I would love to hear them so I can keep making videos that may be applicable to somebody, because hey, right now this is applicable to me. I have pets, but I haven't had a whole wide breadth of life experiences that somebody else may have, and I may have ideas that they didn't consider. So again, let me know in the comments below. I hope you liked this video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.